Is everybody already there? 2 Thessalonians 2 and verse 1. This is scripture. Probably 2 or 3 weeks ago we looked at this scripture and talked about this, so we're not going to reteach everything. But last week Herb brought an article. Well, the author of this article had a different understanding of some of these verses that we looked at. And I want to point some things out that are flawed in what he is saying about these scriptures. Now, begin at verse 1. He says, "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Yeshua Messiah, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as the day of Messiah is at hand." And then verse 3. So what we got here in these first 2 verses of chapter 2, Paul is talking about the day of the Lord, the return of Yeshua, the return of Jesus. And he's telling these people, because there's a rumor going around that pretty much they've missed the second coming. It's already taken place. And they've missed it. So Paul is reassuring them here that pretty much you've not missed it. So now, to prove that this rumor is going around, that I'm not just making this up, let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 2. And verse 15. And I think we even looked at this scripture that same week, but Paul's telling Timothy, "Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, but shun profane and vain babblings. For they will increase into more ungodliness, and their word will eat as doth a canker, of whom is," and I'm going to say, "Hymenaeus and Philetus, who concerning the truth have erred." This is what they're saying. This is what Paul is saying that these 2 guys are saying. Saying that the resurrection is past already and overthrow the faith of some. So here we have Paul saying that these 2 people are telling people that the resurrection has already occurred, and by telling them that, it's caused some to stray away. Because, let's just ask this question, if you're living this life and you hear a rumor that, Paul, the resurrection's already occurred, what's going to be your first thing?
When did that happen?
You didn't see it.
I didn't see it.
You've never heard of a secret rapture before?
I missed it somehow.
Because it's a secret.
It was on YouTube.
But
Was it?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
get YouTube.
if you find out that it's already happened, and so now you have no reward. So why would you keep doing what you're doing? Why would you keep living and obeying God when it's not going to get any better than this? So this is what these 2 were telling people. The resurrection has already occurred, and that's caused people to stray. So in Thessalonians here, Paul is reassuring the Thessalonians that the resurrection has not taken place. So let's go to verse 3, because this is where the guy in the article says that we misunderstand what verse 3 is saying, what Paul is saying.
In Timothy?
In Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians.
2 verse 3.
So we go back, we leave Timothy and go back to Thessalonians.
Yes.
Okay.
So verse 3 says, so Paul said, the day's not come yet, Messiah is not returned. Verse 3, he says, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for the day shall not come." So the return of Messiah shall not come, he says, except there come a falling away first, and that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. So this is the scripture that the guy in this article that Herb brought last week for me to read. This is where he's saying that except this falling away, he says, is the rapture. Now there's a couple of things that about this guy. This guy, I can't think of his name, it's right here, but his name's not important. He is a prophecy teacher, but he is a pre-tribulation prophecy teacher. So he teaches that you're not going to have to do any suffering. You're not going to have to deal with any of the things that are going to take place. So you're going to be gone before the tribulation starts. Okay, so we can even look at this in 2 Thessalonians and see where that doesn't fly. Because, and here's again, so same thing if the rapture's already happened. Verse 3, keep that in mind. If the rapture's already happened, why should you keep living for God when this is as good as you're going to get? It's right here. So why not live like everybody else that got left behind? But he says that this guy in the article, not Paul, but the guy in the article, says that that day will not come. Okay, so let's put this guy's definition of apostasia. This day will not come, the return of Messiah will not come, except first the rapture occur. That in itself makes Paul sound like an idiot. So we could go back. We're not going to go there yet. But if this is what Paul is saying in 2 Thessalonians, then what he says in 1 Thessalonians is canceled out. Because in 1 Thessalonians, he's talking about the rapture, the coming of Yeshua, the coming of Jesus. He's talking about, in 2 Thessalonians here, he is talking about apostasia, the rebellion. Because, okay, if this guy in the article is right, and you're going to be raptured before the tribulation starts. Let's look on down here because it says, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. So if you're gone, then what is the purpose for the Antichrist to show up? He don't have a purpose. The whole purpose of the Antichrist, his goal, is to stomp you out. Am I right or am I wrong?
No, well, I'd say his purpose is to be worship this God.
His what?
That's why he goes into the temple and declares himself to be God. That's his purpose.
Right, but now you're gone. If you go with this guy, what his thinking is that you're already gone. So if everybody else is living in sin, then why would the lawless one, is what he's also referred to, who's he got to fool?
Because they're already full.
Yeah.
They're going to follow after him.
Yeah. Everybody he wants to fool is gone if you're going to be taken away before he shows up.
Back when I was, before
I thought he was fooling those who believe him who have denied the truth, it says here.
But if you believe the truth, then why would he, and you're gone, how could he fool you?
Where's the contention?
Because if he's sent here to fool people who already don't believe the truth, his work's done before he shows up.
I was taught before the pre-rapture teachers when I read the Left Behind series, I got the impression that those that got left behind, you've got people that somehow see the light and start sharing. And at the end, when Jesus comes back again at the end of the 7 years, then he's supposed to take the ones that came to faith.
The ones that came to faith during the tribulation.
Yeah, and that's what the two witnesses were all about.
That's what that don't play out when you actually put the words of Jesus into it. Because, see, Paul's in agreement, if you don't mind me going ahead of you here. This is addressed between Christ and the disciples back in Matthew 24.
Who's going to go ahead and read that?
And he starts out in his answer to them many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear wars and rumors of wars, and he gets into all this other stuff. And then you go to verse 23, and he says, when you see all this other stuff happening, he's talking to the disciples. If they had been raptured, why is he telling them?
Right.
But if they see all these woes and this tribulation, he says, if anyone says to you, like this author, look, here's the Christ, or there, do not believe it, for false Christ and fake prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect.
Well, that's one of the things I'd always thought about when I was taught the pre-rapture is, okay, so why do we read Revelation? What's it matter to us if we're gone?
Right.
Yeah, but he doesn't finish there. He says, see, I have told you beforehand, so you've been warned what to be looking for. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out, or look, he is in the inner room, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will coming of the Son of Man be. So we're not looking for a secret rapture. He is coming, and every eye will see him.
Every eye.
That's
Every eye.
Jesus' word.
So,
if you can't believe that, then who are you following?
And we'll look at that verse a little bit later tonight
All
too.
right, I got some other questions.
But
Jesus is coming for the bride, right? We're the bride.
Right?
Why would the bridegroom want a bride that's all bloodied and all beaten up if we're going to go through the tribulation?
why are you going to be bloody and beaten up?
If we're going to go through the tribulation, why would he want?
Well, let me ask you this question: were the apostles part of the bride?
I don't know.
They were part of the bride. It was Israel. Israel's part of the bride. The nation, the whole nation.
Only the remnant.
Okay, but Israel in the Old Testament was the bride.
At that time, they were the bride.
Yes.
So Israel is in Egypt, which Egypt is going to be, we could say, is kind of a symbolism of the world outside of Christianity. So Israel is in Egypt. It's God's plan to bring them out from Egypt. But when you read in Exodus, they had to go through some of the plagues. So they were there. They had to face some of the plagues. But now he didn't take them out. Then you've got, so that does away with what about that? So he didn't take them out, then send the plagues. He didn't say, Israel come out, now Egypt's going to pay the price. No. They were there, had to go through some of the plagues. Well, then you have people who say, well, he's going to bring us out in the middle of the tribulation. Well, that doesn't play out either. Because as Egypt went through the remaining plagues, Israel was still in Egypt, but God protected them, and those plagues didn't come near them. They were in Egypt all the way through the plagues. The firstborns being killed, Israel's there, but Israel bore a mark that said, this one belongs to me. When some say, the translations say the destroyer, some say the angel, the death angel, but they bore a mark on their house that God said, that one's mine. You don't touch him. So if he could do that for Israel, why could he not do that today?
And back to
that is the central part of their confusion. Those plagues were all rendered by God against basically the worldly way, Egypt, at that time. And so they take that example and move it into Revelations, and they see God's hand in all the plagues of Revelation. But that is not what Christ is saying. He's saying the deceiver's coming with great wrath. The tribulation is the devil's.
Yep.
His target is the Christianity.
Yep.
And when he is thoroughly finished with it, God said enough is enough. That's when God comes and he is going to deal with the devil and his minions.
Yep.
And that wrath is not pointed toward us. But we don't have to be out of the way. He can shoot, the ticks off your shoulder at 1,000 yards without touching you.
Absolutely. So,
I was just going to say that Revelation, it talks about these are they who had come out of great tribulation, and talking about the disciples, every one of them except for John, I think, died a very violent death.
Yep.
And I mean, they were the closest ones to Jesus. To me, and this is just human thinking, but if anybody deserved to go straight to heaven, these were the ones that came through so much, being followers of His.
Yeah. So I think the scriptures even tell us itself that He is not a respecter of persons, and it rains on the just and the unjust. So, in my opinion, Israel had to go through a portion of those plagues. This is my opinion, because of a rebellious nature. Because while they were in Egypt, they weren't wholeheartedly worshiping Him. They had took on some of the Egyptian culture, so there had to be that separation there. So they had to pay a price for their rebellion.
They had pretty much forgotten everything.
I'm giving the benefit of the doubt.
No, there's no benefit of doubt, because they'd forgotten the Sabbath and they had forgotten circumcision.
Yeah.
And it all had to be reintroduced.
Oh, that's right.
So let's.
It was after they left Egypt, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Let's.
After they left
yeah,
Egypt, they got retaught.
but
They had forgotten everything while they were captive.
And that's
in
what
Egypt.
happened at the mountain.
We know
was
that they didn't circumcise the boys while the ones they.
The ones
Pharaohs
that
that
were in
couldn't.
the 40 years was not.
Moses was not.
Moses
never
forgot
circumcised.
to circumcise his children.
Yeah, but
so
was he circumcised?
it doesn't go into detail.
I believe he was.
Well, he might have been.
It's
But
speculation.
it's speculation. 'Cause
So-
it doesn't say
Okay,
specific.
so getting back
Welcome
to the
to Crossfire.
rapture. Are we pre-trib? Are we mid-trib? Are we post-trib? What are we here?
I am at the end of the tribulation.
You're what?
Post.
I'm post-trib because that's what the scriptures
Well,
lay out. Let's look at
I'm
what.
pre-trib, and
the,
so I'll meet you up there because I'm going first.
You're not going
Well, not if the Bible says you're not. You're not. So the Bible says it this way. In Matthew 2, this is what Yeshua says: two will be in a field, one will be taken, the other left. Well, if you follow his thinking through, the one taken isn't going to any kind of cloudy place. The first ones taken are the sinners, the rebellious people, and he's taking them to the barn, or the angels are taking them to his parable, to the barn, to be burned, to be consumed. So in Christianity, you're taught that you want to be the first one going, and the sinner friend will be the last one left. The scriptures say, not so. You want to be the one left. And Yeshua says, not Scott, not some prophecy teacher, but Jesus himself said, the ones I'm taking out are the ones that are going to be consumed by the fire. But let's look at the word here, apostasia, that Paul uses in 2 Thessalonians as some scriptures. And I didn't cherry pick these scriptures. If you've got a Thompson Chain Bible, and you look up 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 3, and you take that little number it gives you out by the word apostasia, and you flip back there, it's going to lead you to 1 Timothy chapter 1. And these are places that this word is used.
1 Timothy 1.
1 Timothy chapter 1. And verse 19. So we're going to get an understanding, because who wrote Timothy? Paul did. So we're going to understand what Paul associated the word apostasia with. 1 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 19. I should have brought a different Bible. Says, holding faith and a good conscience, which some having put away, that word put away is apostasia, concerning faith, have made shipwreck. So the word apostasia means to depart from. It means a rebellion. It means a defection. So it does not mean a rapture. So if we put in that understanding or catching away, so Paul is saying holding faith and a good conscience, which some have raptured, have been snatched concerning faith, have been made shipwrecked. Does that make any sense?
That makes sense.
But if we put in the definition of the word, which some having departed from the faith have been made shipwrecked. Some of those who have rebelled. Yes, sir.
The NLT has it this way. For some people have deliberately violated their consciences. As a result, their faith has been shipwrecked.
There you go.
There. See?
I don't see.
Well,
What does yours say? Deliberately? That's the same
deliberately
thing.
violated.
They purposely walked away from the faith on purpose. That's what deliberately means. If you deliberately do something, you do it knowingly and on purpose that you've done it. So they deliberately walked away from the faith and was made shipwrecked.
If you read verse 20, and this is the ESV, but it says, by rejecting this, some have made shipwreck of their faith. They have totally demolished their faith by rejecting it. Among whom are Hymenaeus and
Hymenaeus is one of the guys that was spreading the rumor. The rapture had already occurred.
And Alexander, whom I have handed over to Satan, that they may learn not to blaspheme. If that don't say it right there.
So Hymenaeus, the one who was spreading the rumor that Paul tells Timothy again in the second letter, they're saying that the rapture has already occurred. Paul is saying here that Hymenaeus has apostatized. He's deliberately walked away. He has rebelled. Let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 1. It says, now the Spirit, this is the Spirit of Yahweh, the Spirit of God, speaketh expressly that in what? Later times. Some shall apostatize, apostasia, shall depart from what? The faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. So here again, Paul uses this apostasia word that the guy in this article says means to catch away and to be raptured. And we've seen Paul use this word 3 times now. And every time he's used it, he's referred to a departing away from the faith, departing away from truth. Let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 4.
Read verse 2 there before you go, because that sums it up. What the teaching of demons is.
Yeah, I saw that.
Hypocrisy and ours, having seared in their own conscience.
With a hot iron. Yeah, he even goes in, I think he even talks about fables and the different things there. So here he's talking about, just like that verse 2 does sum it up, speaking lies and hypocrisy. So here again, what he's saying is, if you've heard anything opposite of what I'm telling you or any of the other apostles are telling you, it's a lie. And so now we've honed in on this, how I pronounce it, Hymenaeus is one of those he is referring to. So 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse let's start at verse 3. 2 Timothy 4 and 3 says, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. This means teachers who are telling them what they want to hear. In verse 4, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. This turn away is this same word, apostasia. So Paul is saying here that they are going to depart from truth and not endure sound doctrine. Here again, he's not saying that they're going to they're going to rapture. They're going to snatch their ears away and from truth. This guy's definition just does not play out. Hebrews chapter 3. Here again, I say that Paul was the author of Hebrews. Some may differ, but verse number 12. Here again, whoever wrote Hebrews, verse 12 says, "Take heed, brethren, lest there be any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God." So here again, same word, apostasia, apostatize. And he's talking here again of departing from truth. Here he's talking about departing from God. So would he say this if this apostasia was rapture?
Rapture to God.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be just opposite.
Yeah. So it says that you have an evil heart of unbelief and God's going to snatch you up to be with Him? Well, if that's the truth, my Lord, let's leave right now. And let's go buy some Easter baskets and Christmas trees and all that other stuff. We don't have to do Sabbath anymore. If that's the truth, I can live the way I want to. And I'm going to make it to the kingdom because that's just what He said, if that's what this apostasia means. And 2 Peter chapter 3. So we now have an understanding of how Paul used apostasia. Every time he used it, it was not a rapture or a snatching away or a catching away or being with God. Every time that Paul used it, it was in reference to departing from the truth. Verse 17, let's see how Peter uses it.
1 Peter what?
2 Peter chapter 3. Verse 17 says, "Ye therefore, beloved, seeing ye know these things before, beware, lest ye also, being led away with error of the wicked, fall from your own steadfastness." So Peter uses this word, apostasia, when he talks about being led away with error of the wicked, and warns them, don't do this because you'll fall from your own steadfastness. So even Peter, using the word, uses it as a reference of being led astray or departing from truth or being in rebellion to God, to Yahweh. So we looked that week at apostasia, so to get a better understanding of what this word means, I do something that this guy did not do. I looked to see when they come, the Hebrew word would be zanach. This is the equivalent, the Hebrew equivalent to the Greek word apostasia. So I go and I see when they come across the word zanach in the Old Testament, when they translated the Old Testament into Greek, what did they put in its place? How did they translate it? They translated it, when they come across zanach, the rabbis, the scholars, said that this word means apostasia, apostatize. So we looked, I think it's in 2 Chronicles, as well, 29 and 19. Now, apostasia means to rebel, to defect. The root word of apostasia. Now, here's the. Before we go second, you can go ahead and turn 2 Chronicles. But the root word to apostasy. And this is why this word cannot mean to rapture or to snatch away or to catch away, because the root word means a bill of divorce. So you're saying, when you say in Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, when Paul says that day shall not come unless there is a catching away, the word don't play that out. So if you're going to use that thinking, then Paul is saying to the Thessalonians, Joanne, that day won't come until God hands you a bill of divorce and leaves you.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
Not at all. So you're going to tell me that when the Antichrist gets ready to show up, God's going to say, I'm gone. It don't work that way. He's not going to divorce you right at the very moment you need him the most. Now, down here, your physical spouse may divorce you. I had a sister who got cancer. You know what her husband did? Divorced her. When she needed him the most, he walked out. God's not that kind. So this is another reason that Thessalonians is not talking about a rapture. So who turned to 2 Chronicles?
29:19.
Somebody read that for me.
The whole book?
Just a verse? Yeah, the whole book, Bill.
You mean last night? No, I'm just kidding.
We
2
have,
Chronicles 29 in verse 19.
we have set up and consecrated all the utensils that King Ahaz rejected during his reign when he became unfaithful. They are in front of the altar of the Lord.
So this word Zanach, when they come to 2 Chronicles 29, they put the word apostasia in there because it meant to reject. So here again, so is Paul saying that that day the return of Messiah shall not come until you're rejected? Here again, he's going to reject you when the Antichrist shows up. I mean, I don't want you anymore. Does that sound like God to anybody? It sounds like man to me, but it doesn't sound like God. So let's go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4.
Bless you.
So let's begin at verse 14. First Thessalonians chapter 4. Verse 14 says, For if we believe that Yeshua died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Yeshua will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. So evidently he's coming, and we're still going to be here when he shows up. And we know when you read the rest of the Bible, when he comes back, he's not coming back to snatch us and then go back to heaven. The scriptures don't play that out. When he comes back, he's going to snatch us and we're going to come right back with him. Verse 16 says, For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Verse 17 says, Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words. This word caught up is the Greek word harpazo. So now let me ask you a question. If in 1 Thessalonians, when Paul is talking about what we call the rapture, King James says the caught up or the catching up. Paul uses the word harpazo. So if he's trying to get the same idea across in his next letter to the Thessalonians, why would he use a different word? Why would he use a word that means to reject, to cast away, to rebel, if he's talking about the rapture, when in the first letter he uses the word harpazo? So if he's switching words on them, talking about the same thing, would they understand the same thing? Absolutely
Unless the words meant the same thing.
Not unless
It's
the words-
clear they don't.
Yeah. Not unless the words meant the same thing, and they do not. The word harpazo means caught up. But it also means to claim.
So what?
It means to claim for oneself eagerly. It means to snatch out or to snatch away.
That's by force.
As by force. The root to this word means to prefer or to elect to an office. So this harpazo has nothing in common with apostasia at all. But if we go, let's go into to chapter 5. I want to show you something that we miss when we just read and don't look into it for ourselves. But it says, but of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you, for yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with a child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day should overtake you as a thief. It says, you are children of the light and the children of the day. We are not of the night nor of the darkness. Okay? Then he says in verse 6, therefore let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night. So I'm going to stop there, because in chapter 4, chapter 5, Paul uses a word, and this word is sleep. So if we take the word sleep out of chapter 4 and chapter 5, if we go the route of the guy that wrote this article, then when the first time we see sleep, when Paul talks about those that sleep, in verse 14, them also which sleep, that means that word sleep there means they're dead. They're in the grave. So we're going to take that word and go to verse 6 of chapter 5. And Paul says, therefore let us not be dead or be in the grave as do others, but let us watch and be sober. Because there he uses the word sleep again. So if the first time he uses sleep and it means dead, doesn't the second time he uses sleep mean in the grave too?
Well, you can make some money if you knew how to keep people alive.
Yeah. So Peter's admonishing Paul, the Apostle Paul, is admonishing people, don't die. Don't be dead. Don't be in the grave like everybody else is. Let me ask you this question. Why would he encourage you not to be dead? Because if you're dead, who goes first?
The dead.
The ones in the grave. So now Paul's saying, you don't want to be first. Why would you want to be first? So don't die. But when we look at the language of the Bible, and you look at the words and the definitions, when Paul says in 5 and 6, therefore let us not sleep as others do, that word sleep means pretty much you're going to bed. You're probably snoring. And what he's referring to is don't be ignorant. Don't do what you see everybody else doing. He's not saying don't die. But he's saying wake up. Be awake. Be watching. Because he says, starting out in his letter, but of the times and the seasons, I don't have to write to you about those things because you already know. So what's he saying here on into the letter? He said, so since you know these things, be watching. You see, this is why he told Timothy, study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that should not be ashamed. But what we can do if we don't study, then we get an understanding that whenever Paul mentions sleep, because he says it there in chapter 4, he's talking about being in the grave. But not all the time. Because he's using different words. So if we don't study and understand what the word apostasia means, and then look and see, well, how is it used everywhere else? Especially when the writer uses it. He never uses this word talking about a catching away or snatching away before the Antichrist shows up.
So when people say that the rapture could take place at any time, they're wrong.
They are wrong.
Very wrong. They haven't read the
They
Bible.
are absolutely wrong. Because even you, Herb, from being here with us, you know that's a lie.
No, I don't.
Well, we've gone through the feast days.
Well, he's missed some stuff since his foot.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about the feast days a year ago.
Okay.
But we know that the feast days, or these fall feast days, have yet to be fulfilled. And
Spring ones are done.
yep. And even Yeshua, Jesus, in the Gospels, when he talks about his returning, he's talking about the Feast of Trumpets, is when his returning is going to be. This is why Paul says, but of the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. Feast of Trumpets, that is a reference to Feast of Trumpets again. He references Feast of Trumpets in verse 16 of chapter 4. For the Lord himself shall descend with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trump of God. You even said last week in Sabbath, or the week before, that trump of God was a reference to Feast of Trumpets. So here again, this is what Paul was telling these people. This is why in 2 Thessalonians he's telling them, don't be deceived into thinking it's already occurred, because it's not occurred. This is why in 1 Thessalonians he's telling them, don't be sleeping, but be watching. Even when, yes sir?
So why couldn't the rapture take place this September or October?
Because there's still prophecies and
7
things
years
that's got to
to
take
fulfill.
place before he returns.
Yeah. The prediction hasn't been revealed.
He's not
The
going.
temple
God
hasn't
is
been
not
built.
going to say, "This is what I've said in my word,"
Sin is not revealed.
but now I'm going to overstep my own word. He's not going to give us warning signs and then say, "You know what?
Oh, I changed my mind.
I've changed my mind. I've told them to wait for these things and to be ready for this time. I've changed my mind."
We're going to have
See,
a surprise party.
Yeah, we're going to have a surprise party.
Our problem is, he wrote to Thessalonica and to Timothy, and he tells them that they already know, so I don't need to write this other stuff to you.
Right.
And then the modern Christian reads that and thinks, well, I know everything too. And no, I'm sorry, you don't. Because you haven't studied the Old Testament, you don't understand it. And just like you were saying about the feast. The Feast of Trumpet is the coronation of the king, not the marriage supper.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, you can.
Coronation of the king. He is coming back to be king.
Yeah.
Then it's the Day of Atonement. And I've pointed this out several times in Decaturville, and a lot of people don't seem to get this. All the sacrifices that we have ever made up to the Day of Atonement, all that whole year worth of sacrifices is for sin. But they are still not atonement. the relationship has not been reassembled, put back together. Your sins are no more, but you're not yet my friend. You're not part of what God is doing until you're atonement. And so that's why atonement is next after trumpets, is because Christ has got to make that atonement for us before we can come in then during the Feast of Tabernacles and be the baptized. Because until we're atoned for, we're still on the outside. We're still strangers. And so that then, he's here, he's king, then the atonement, then the marriage.
That's why it's important to read, because I've already heard from a pastor I know that you attend that has said that Christ has already fulfilled all the feast days.
No.
And it's not true. And I kind of said that's why you have to study and guard your mind and your heart what you hear. And maybe it's because he just doesn't understand.
He doesn't.
But to teach and to say something like that, you really got to be cautious about that, because you're leading people astray. Because now they're waiting for the harpazo. They're taken away, and before this 7-year tribulation, everything's gonna be good because we don't have to worry about it.
So let's do the same thing with harpazo as we done with apostasia. The Greek equivalent is the word gazal, G-A-Z-A-L. And this word too means to snatch away, even to snatch away violently, or to pluck out, or to catch away. And so we have to go to the Old Testament to see that when they translate it into Greek, when they come to gazal, what did they put in its place? And they put the word harpazo in the Greek. When they come across what it meant to snatch away, or to take, or to even snatch away violently. Let's go to Genesis chapter 8, which is the first place that this word shows up in the Bible. And we'll start at verse 10. This is the flood. And we're going to see even in this maybe a little foreshadowing. It says, and he stayed yet other 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came into him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. Harpazo. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from the earth. So apostasia does not mean pluck off. When they come to gazal, they pluck off, they put harpazo in that spot. Now, what is unique is that we got Noah in the ship. Well, what was going on? What caused Noah to be in the boat? Rebellion was taking place. People were doing their own thing. And so, what did God do? God told Noah, I'm fixing to come and destroy everything that is in rebellion to me. And he told Noah, he said, build you an ark. He didn't say, build me an ark. He said, you build yourself an ark. And told him how to do it. Well, why would he want Noah to build an ark? Because Noah, Protection. Now, we look at that situation, and then we go to what Paul's talking about in the world. He talks about in the last days, men will be lovers. He writes this to Timothy, men will be lovers of their own flesh. They'll be haters and liars and disobedient to their parents, and on and on and on he goes. He says that they're going to love their flesh, but they're going to hate me. And so this is what, again, this is the same scenario in Noah's time. Men hated God, they hated Yahweh, and they wanted to do things their own way. Didn't we read last week? Or the week before? Isaiah was last week where it talks about we all like sheep have gone astray and went our own way, done our own thing. So the flood comes, and who does it get rid of?
The evil.
Evil.
The evil people. He wipes out the evil ones, but leaves Noah and his family where?
Behind.
In the earth. Yes, sir.
Let's use the word caught away. When the flood came,
I think it does.
like a thief in the night,
Yep.
the people were caught unawares, asleep. They
Peter.
were caught away
Yep.
and drowned by the same flood, catches Noah in the ark and bears him up.
Yep.
Do you have a number for that one?
For which one?
Gazelle.
I do not.
Okay.
No. So here again, we're taught in churchianity, in the church, that we're going to be taken out, and then all the bad people are going to remain here for the punishment. But here again, we looked at Israel and Egypt. Now let's look at Noah and the flood. He sent the flood and got rid of the evil people, but left Noah and his family. And the purpose, the reasoning was because they were obedient to him and all of that. But they were left here, we could say, to make a new earth.
Yep.
And so what does Yeshua say is going to happen?
You
John
have-
says, I saw a new heaven
And a new
and a new earth. Yeshua says that the meek shall inherit the earth. So we're not going away.
He's coming.
He's
here.
coming here. And the evil ones, those that have been disobedient, are the ones that are going to be snatched away. Yes, sir.
When God shut the door to the ark, he waited 7 days. Could that be for 7 years? Can you compare that to 7 years before the tribulation? Or can it be compared to today, the 7 days? I assume he waited 7 days so that those inside could adjust to their new quarters and get them, but he waited 7 days. It wasn't immediate.
Or the
It doesn't
tribulation
actually-
is Satan's.
He's talking about like in chapter 7
7.
and
Yeah.
verse 4.
The language there is non-specific, and so it doesn't say he was shut in and 7 days passed in the water, because it shut him in verse 16, and he was told to do what to do in verse 9. And the 7 days then is verse 10. And so, you don't have specifics like we would like to have in the book of Genesis.
7 days later, the waters of the flood came on the earth. Says in verse 10.
Give it drop down to
I'm looking at 7:10, and it says 7 days.
Give it look.
After
Drop down to 16.
16.
So the animal, the flesh, and just as God had commanded
And
him.
Because
Then
now
the
they're
Lord
entering
shut
the
him
ark.
And God shut him in. But you already experienced the water before you experiencing the shutting in. So it's not a specific enough language that you can take any other meanings than what the plain meaning is.
The Lord closed the door behind them. And
And the flood
you say immediately the flood waters came, or it doesn't say that either. So there was a waiting period.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
We don't.
We're given these different things, but we're not shown exactly how they fit to where you can bring any other conclusion than just reading the plain text.
And 30.
So some have alluded that to.
A lot of people allude a lot of things,
Yep.
and you take it with a grain of salt, or a whole salt shaker.
Let's look at 8 and 11 again. It talks about the dove snatching the leaf off of the olive branch. Well, the people of God, the people of Yahweh, the olive tree, we are referred to as an olive tree. And we see that this dove coming, he snatched away a leaf from that olive tree. But it was 7 days as the waters began to abate and to leave. It was 7 days later that the dove comes against the leaf, takes it back to Noah, and then they know that the flood is over, that it's ending. And it's the same. If you look though, the 7 days is the duration of the Hebrew wedding. So for 7 days we're in that wedding time.
And it also recounts the creation week.
Yep.
So the cycle of 7 days is still known and still followed.
But we also look again that we already said this, that the reason for them to be there was to make the new heaven and the new earth. And when we're in that Sukkot period, tabernacles, which lasts 7 days, and then you have the 8th day, that last great day, that's your celebration. That's your celebration time. That's the day you can celebrate, because guess what? You made it through. You are the elect. And remember that this word harpazo means to pick. You are chosen for a purpose. He's not snatching up everybody, but he's only snatching his elect.
And see,
And
that's another point some people miss, especially when you haven't done tabernacles throughout all our history, is tabernacles portrays the marriage feast. Well, if you remember the one about the parable about the virgins, there's 10 show up, but 5 of them got to go back and get more oil. Well, when they come up, no, the door's already closed. You're out. Well, what does that mean? Those 5, even though they're virgins, are not brides to Christ. And that's what we see in that 8th day, the day after the Feast of Tabernacles, 7 days, is the wedding of the bride. The 8th day, then, is also called the Great Salvation. And that's when the Great White Throne Judgment of Revelation occurs, and people that have never heard the name of Jesus get the first opportunity to hear that name and understand it. But the marriage is already over. See? They can be part of the kingdom, but they can't be part of the bride.
right. So the last scripture, I think, let's go to Matthew chapter 24. I think Paul's referenced the first part of Matthew. So let's kind of pick up he referenced the first part, middle part. Let's pick up the tail end a little bit of Matthew. So you will see here that everything that Paul and Peter has said, Yeshua, they're just backing up what he said in verse 36. It says, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only." So here again, this is a reference to trumpets, because you don't know what day it's going to show up on. "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." So keep in mind, we've already looked at, we know what was going on during the days of Noah, but Noah was still there. So here, Yeshua is saying it's going to be just like that when I get ready to return. He doesn't say, he would not say that if we weren't going to be there. If we weren't going to be here, if you're already gone, why would you care what the conditions were where you were living? He says, "For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark." So Noah's in the ark. No one knows why he's in the ark, but everybody around him don't care. They are oblivious to what's going on because they're doing their own thing. It says, and not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So here again, Yeshua says, Noah's in the ark, he's protected. He's safe. But then he says, and not until the flood came and took them all away. Who's the them?
Sinful people.
Those that were facing the judgment. Those that were doing their own thing. So judgment came. The flood was judgment. We have to understand that right away. That was the judgment. You've rebelled. You got to go. You got to leave. You can't stay here. And he wasn't talking to Noah. Now, Noah could have rebelled at Paul and said, I'm not building a boat. Because if I build this boat out here, these people are going to think I'm crazy. They're going to talk about me in town if I'm out here, Tom, and me and my boys are cutting wood and building a boat because we're landlocked. We're not going sailing. We don't have a truck to back up here and haul this boat to the lake out here. I mean, there ain't any water around us. It's not going to float in the creek.
And God says, that's fine. How long can you tread water?
Absolutely. That would have probably been his response. Well, go ahead and don't build the boat. Because God could have said, I'm trying to save you from the oncoming judgment. And he could have said, well, just take me. Take me out. Well, had he took him out, what would have been left? Nothing. If he had took him out and not sent the flood, if he took Noah out and not sent the flood, you would have had a world full of mess. Yeah. So God says, that's not my plan. Because I'm going to need you to do what your grandparents, great
10 generations.
Yeah. Grandparents should have done, but they messed it up. Now I'm going to start with you. And if you look all through the scriptures, that's exactly what he did. He put Adam and Eve in the garden. They were in paradise. They messed it up. They let sin get in. So their mistake is what brings us up to Noah's generation. So God says, Noah, they messed it up. I'm going to keep it in the family, and I'm going to start over with you. The sin's got to go. So you got Noah. God cleans the planet, gives them a new earth to work on. It don't take long until Noah messes it up. And then we could jump ahead. So then God says, I'm still keeping it in the family. And he found somebody named Abraham. And he says, I'm going to use you and your family to get to this paradise that I'm heading back to. It's cyclical. Is that the word?
Cyclical.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. The big circle. I mean, if you look at the feast, it's not a straight line, but it's a circle. You got Passover, blah, 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 Pentecost, blah, 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 trumpets, atonement, tabernacles. It just keeps going and going and going. This is what he's doing. He's looking for the people that are going to be able to fulfill what he initially started. So for him, so then, Abraham, they messed it up. Abraham messed it up and gave us Ishmael. We're so thankful.
Thank you.
He gave us Ishmael. And then he even told God, he said, just use Ishmael. And God said, I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm going to give you somebody, but it ain't him. And so you go through that, well then eventually you see that all gets messed up. And so Jacob and them go down to Egypt. And while they're in Egypt, just like Paul said, that all got messed up. So they come out of Egypt, and he says, I'm going to teach you the instructions that your grandparents couldn't keep. Surely you can keep them. So he gives them at the mount, says, this is what I require. They say, yay! Until a few days later, then they tell Aaron, make us a god. So Aaron says, well, let's take this jewelry. No, I threw that in the fire, and out popped this calf, and all that.
Yeah.
So God, says, okay. So Israel, all through their history, one failure after the next. And then Judah, they start messing up, and they get angry with Israel, and Israel gets angry with Judah. Then they hate each other, and so they both get sent into captivity, and then Judah returns back to the land, and Israel says, we're fine out here. So God told them, I'm going to scatter you, because I'm going to divorce you, because you can't keep my instructions. So he said, I'm going to apostatize you. Is pretty much what he was saying. I'm casting you away because you can't keep my instructions. But his love for us and for them was so strong, just like Abraham. We're not going to get on this tonight, evidently, but Abraham told Isaac, God will provide himself. That word himself means, and the word provide means, you put them together, that God's showing up himself. He's going to make himself the sacrifice. And so he loved us so much that he came himself and gave his flesh. He became that sacrifice so that you and I could be saved, and that he could put his spirit inside of us, because he just has that much faith in us that he says, surely, Paul, if I put my spirit in you, that you'll be able to keep my instructions. If I now become part of you, surely you'll be able to follow my instructions, and I can do something great with you. Well,
Christian history, 2,000 years.
Yeah,
Think about it.
we can look at that, and what does Paul say? He says, listen, there's these fellows out there spreading this rumor, telling you people that you've missed it. And because they've told you this, you're going astray. You're apostatizing yourself. Now you're divorcing God. Because these two characters have told you the rapture, the catching away, has already happened. And Paul says, not so. Not so. But a falling away has to occur before Yeshua will come back. This is one of the signs you're going to get. They're going to fall away. Yes, sir.
So Paul believed that we would go through tribulation?
Yeah. Why would he not?
Okay, then what the need for the 144,000 is to what? Why does God raise up 144,000 Jewish evangelists?
Somebody's got to evangelize the Jewish people.
Jewish people.
Just for the Jewish people, not for Gentiles?
No, it's for all of Israel, not just the Jews. The Jews is one tribe, or the house of Judah is actually 3 tribes.
So is the
We lost 10 tribes.
Okay, so they're going to be, since the Jewish people are scattered, there's going to be so many evangelists in each part of the world? Is that what, they're not going to all be concentrated in Israel?
It doesn't come out to a very high figure. If you would consider that America is the tribe of Israel, and divided 12,000 amongst our nation, it only amounts to 1 person per county. So you're not going to notice it. 12,000 coming out of America, you're not going to notice it.
Okay. So they're all going to be in Israel when these 144,000 come, God raises them up? That's my
They
understanding.
get to come and be part of the New Jerusalem.
Yep.
But they're going to live wherever they were born, and follow the calling, whatever calling they were given,
That's what
and preach to the lost 10 tribes as well as to the Jews. since we don't know specifically who's in the lost tribes, because they are lost, we don't know where they're going to be on the planet.
Well, they say that it wasn't when the kingdom broke up to Israel and Judah, that those who wanted to worship the temple left the northern part and came south. So there was part of every tribe that came south.
Yeah, but Judah was
makes
disbanded
sense.
again.
Huh?
So Judah was disbanded again.
Finally, yeah.
But the ones that God said He would scatter, they got scattered.
Yes.
And He said He would woo them back.
Would be a remnant.
And that's what that remnant of the 12,000 of each of the tribes. He's wooing them back, and that's evidence of it. That because of the great evil at their beginning, He's showing 12,000 in each tribe that are absolutely pure. And that opposition is what He's after. But these 12,000 have actually done what I offered to you at the beginning. So when they're resurrected, He said, see these are your great-great-great-grandchildren. This is what I wanted for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 144,000 evangelists will, because they're sealed, will go into the millennium. Okay, where do they get their wives from?
Amongst the
evangelization, the Jewish women would be their wives, I'm assuming.
And
I mean, it wasn't against the laws for the Israelite people to marry from without, as long as the woman would come in and be, like Ruth. Your people will be my people, your God will be my God. As long as they were that way, He's fine with them. And you see that in the city of Jericho. Who was taken out of Jericho? Rahab the harlot.
Yep.
Then you read the genealogy of Christ. She's in it.
Yep.
So is Ruth.
And in Matthew, same chapter 24, verse 29, it says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And He will send out His angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather His elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other.
So this is the trumpet call that Paul is talking about in Thessalonians.
After the tribulation.
And this is Christ speaking,
Yes.
what she's reading, immediately after the tribulation of those days. Then you will see Christ come.
And what we used to be taught was that the rapture and the second coming were two different things.
But that's
Well,
not
see,
what Christ
that's
said.
one
what
of
I'm
the
saying.
references-
That's what we were taught.
I know, but
And-
that's not what Christ said.
Well, I'm seeing that. but-
One of the other things about this guy's name is Jerry Robinson. So we know that he's a pre-tribber, but the book that he suggests that you get as a dictionary, a reference guide, is written by Tim LaHaye,
Yep.
Also pre-tribber.
Yeah,
which is a pre-tribber. So
Yeah.
therefore you get
And a
Left
fiction,
Behind.
a
And he's
fiction writer.
And he's a fiction writer. So that should tell you that there's a problem when you've got a supposed Bible scholar saying, go read a book written by a fiction author. He's going to tell you about
He was one of the authors in the Left Behind series.
Yeah.
wasn't he?
him, and Jenkins was the other one, I
We made a
think.
lot of money. Let me tell
Yeah,
you.
and
He made a lot
I
of
got
money.
some nice bonuses.
A lot of
Long
people.
hours getting the books out.
Well, I could lie and be wealthy too.
Yeah, but
So-
we have a lot of teachers of eschatology that are preaching the pre-trib rapture.
Oh yeah. Well, what do you want to hear?
Yeah.
Right.
You're not going to have to face anything.
Well, what's the
or-
name from End Time Ministry? What's the name from?
End Time Ministry's not pre-trib.
He does.
No, he's not a pre-trib
Okay,
person.
well I thought, but I know that Hal Lindsey talked about pre-tribulation, and I can't remember what else. But I mean,
Basically.
There's dozens of them out there. You
Oh,
don't
yeah.
have to
Yeah.
name them. But they're
But I
out
mean-
there.
Look at a football coliseum and you'll find them stepped up there. But verse 40 says, verse 40 says, then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken and the other left. 41, two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, the other left. And so we've already talked about this. We're taught that you want to be the one taken. But that's not what he says in some other places. And that's not what it says in Revelation. You don't want to be the one that's taken. You want to be the one that's left. Verse 42 says, watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord does come. Here again, he's giving us a clue as to what season we're going to be in. We don't know the day, we don't know the hour, but we know what season we're going to be in. Verse 43 says this, but know this, that if the goodman of the house, the New King James says the master, I believe, of the house. So your body is a what?
Temple.
It's a temple. It's a house. It's the house of God. But you are the one who ultimately decides what you do and what you believe. And Yeshua says that if the master of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken into. So what is he? So if we go deeper, he's saying, if you had been watching, if you'd been watching what I'm telling you about, you wouldn't have allowed all these lies, all this deceit to come into your house that's going to lead you astray. So verse 44 says, therefore be ye also ready. For here's another hint. For in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. He then says, who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he comes, shall find so doing. So here again is another hint. We're going to be here when he returns. And when he returns, he expects us to be doing Sabbath. No matter what the conditions on the outside may look like, he says, if you're one of mine, you're going to be following my instructions. You're going to be keeping Sabbath. You're going to be doing the feast days. And you know, when you get to this feast day, it's going to be in this season that I'm coming back. If you're not doing this, and this is why a lot of end time teachers have got their thought process is wrong and their events are wrong. And I'm not an end time teacher by no means. Some of y'all know more than I do about the end times. But I do know that if you don't understand the Sabbaths and the feast days, that your calendar, that what you're marking off these events on in Revelation is going to be wrong. Because you're going to find the feast days in the book Revelation, and you're going to find things occurring on those feast days in the book Revelation. The book Revelation is the Passover. That's what it is. That's what's taking place. So here again, because you are the bride or the church or whatever you want to call yourself, you're in Egypt, and the goal is to bring you to Him so that you'll be brought out to serve Him. What did Moses keep saying to Pharaoh? Let our people go so that we can go serve our God. So this is what this whole thing is about. The conditions to make it right to where you are able to serve Him.
I'm still troubled by the fact that if during the tribulation we're protected, why does it talk about so much bloodshed?
Because Satan's having his heyday throughout the tribulation.
Yeah, but the Antichrist is allowed to kill believers. So why would
got
we
his
want to
head cut
go
off.
through that? Why would you?
Well, we don't choose to go through it.
It's like this, Herb.
He's refining.
Peter knew. Yeshua told Peter how he was going to die. But Peter still had to die. Even though he was preaching the gospel, he had to die. Philip evangelized an Ethiopian eunuch. But in the end, Philip had to die. God did not magically come and swoop them out of heaven to die. He did bring Peter out of the prison at one time, but that was because it wasn't his time to go. So he had to show that I'm able to do these things. Matthew, Thomas, Bartholomew, all of them had, the only one that was not executed was John. But look at John. His eyes were plucked out, or they were done away with. He was boiled in oil.
Yeah.
He was still carrying the gospel. He was still reaching people, but he still had to go through that suffering.
And today you've got the guys getting beheaded because the terrorists want, for their faith. You've got you read Book of Martyrs, there's all these people that have had to suffer for their faith because they believe in Christ, and it's because it's a fallen world and evil is out there, and we're just going to have to. And he's
So
refining us.
we're going to see the Antichrist. We're going to be
If you live long enough. I mean, if nature doesn't take its course, and you go the way of the grave before these events take place, if you live long enough, then yeah, you'll see the Antichrist.
I should expect to be killed by him too, shouldn't I?
Well, I don't.
If you're going to obey the instructions of God, because that's what he's coming to do. He's coming to, I think somebody here said it tonight, he's coming to, you said it, he's coming to be worshipped as God. So if you're a believer in the one true Yahweh, and well, somebody over here said it,
Yeah.
you're not going to bow a knee to this false Christ. You're not going to follow him. One of the things they're going to say is everybody has got to worship on Sunday. That's one of the things they're going to say. Because that's part of the religious system that's going to usher in this character.
And they're also
So they're not going to want you doing the feast days, because that's not going to be worship to him. That's worship to the true one.
Yep.
So he's not going to stand for that.
So it says he's going to change the times and the seasons.
Yep.
Antichrist, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
He's already been doing
That
that.
makes sense.
So he's not going to,
He's
like
already, a lot of it's already been done.
Yeah.
Hanukkah, Antiochus Epiphanes. That's one of the things he did. First it was all the Jewish people voluntarily, to keep the peace. They said, if we join them, they'll leave us alone.
So,
Yep.
And so it says in the Maccabees that they covered up their circumcision so that they could go to the gymnasiums and practice in the games. That way nobody would know that they were a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Antioch, Epiphanes, he says, you know what? I'm going to start implementing this. Everybody has to start following my rules. So a couple of them voluntarily did it, and it was a minority. It wasn't a majority. It was a minority of the people that they went to him and said, we want to do these things. So he said, if a couple want to do it, I'm going to make everybody do it. So in the end, people died. Jewish people were murdered. Women who circumcised their sons. Their babies were killed, hung around their neck for a period of time, and then they were pushed off a cliff. That's God's
some of them
people.
were even placed on meat hooks and
Yeah.
and just left there to die. But even further closer to where we live, World War II. That was the Jewish people. Whether or not that they were believing in Jesus as the Messiah is beside the point. That's God's people. And all of those millions of people died, and they were gassed and all kinds of, the pictures are atrocious. And you think, why didn't that happen here in America, where these are just Americans? These aren't even called, these aren't even God's chosen people. But no, these were God's chosen. And he allowed that to happen. And I think that he would have to go back and apologize to a lot of people if we did not have to suffer at some point. And nobody's raising their hand and saying, hey, choose me, I'll go first, and let me be the example. For all I'm concerned, Lord, take me home first. I think that these people who God is allowing to die, I think that they are, and I don't know any other way to put it, but they're almost privileged because they're not going to have to face that persecution. We are blessed. I think we're very blessed here in America. Mm-hmm. If we were living overseas in some of these other places where we saw this every day, I think we would have a different outlook. But it's happening now. And I was at a store about 4:30 this afternoon, and I asked him, I said, do you guys, because my card has a chip in it or you can scan it. I said, do you do the chip or do you do the scanner? And they said, oh, we do the chip. They said, but there's something real soon coming out that you don't even have to place your card in it. You don't have to scan it. All you have to do is lay it on there. It sucks it out of there, and you're done. And I thought that's one step closer.
There was something on Facebook this last week that there's a company in Illinois or Wisconsin or Illinois or one of those that's making their employees.
Mm-hmm.
No, they're allowing them
voluntary.
to choose. It's voluntary.
Oh, God.
We have a friend who stood behind somebody in line in Florida, and they at Walmart scanned their hand, took it right out of their bank account.
Nope.
Happening right now.
Yeah, but we still have this
Great
problem
deception doesn't have to be forced.
Well, the Crooks
Well-
had the technology. They didn't even have to see your card. They
Absolutely.
can get close to it
Absolutely.
and scan.
Walk
Oh,
by
yeah.
on the sidewalk.
Well, Social Security believes in 666 because they refused, when it first started, refused to give anybody a number starting with 666.
That was because of the populace.
Huh?
That was because of the populace.
They protested.
See, the populace back in those days, they actually knew the Bible.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't
Mhm.
understand it, at
Right.
least they had read it.
Yeah.
And so the first Social Security card said right on the bottom of it, this is not for purposes of identification.
Yeah. That's
Because
a
they
joke now.
knew that numbering system for identification was coming because they read it in the Revelations.
So
And
it's
so they had to have that on there or the people wouldn't take them.
You better write an article about that for getting their paper.
Do you know the other day I never got this before. I've had this phone for I don't know how long. Got this notification on my phone, and I don't even remember who I was with, but they said you were around somebody's phone that blah 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 blah, and it said hold your phone up and it will beam to their phone.
Yep.
It will connect, and pretty much I can draw anything off of their phone and they can draw anything off of my phone. And so I was telling somebody about it, and they said that's how they're hacking people. Any information that you've got on that thing, just like you said, Bill, you can walk right by, beam my phone or whatever, which I had no clue it even had that capability, and get any information, any pictures, whatever they want, right off that phone.
Your heartbeat off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's plumb scary.
So, the question is, why would he cause this? But even Yeshua himself told some nations at his time, you're going to have to be judged. If you're not judged, then pretty much Sodom and Gomorrah will have to be resurrected and repented to. Because what they were doing was enough for judgment. So if I don't judge you because you're doing worse than what they did, I've got to go and apologize to the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And even Lot, it says he was there, and everything that's taking place, the scriptures say, vexed his righteous soul. So even he was there, he was in all that mess, but still, he was there, but he was rescued from the destruction. He had to go through it, because he didn't just walk out the front gate and everybody wished him goodwill.
He didn't get a basket or
Didn't
nothing,
get a
going away
basket.
present.
He ran for his life.
Yeah, and his wife looked back.
Wheat and tares.
Oh, go ahead.
You might remember the parable of wheat and the tares. When the grain had sprouted, this is Christ speaking, of course. And the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, and the tares also appeared. So the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? He said to them, An enemy has done this. The servant said to him, Do you want us then to go and gather them up, gather the tares up? He said, No, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and at the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, First, gather together the tares and bind them in the bundles and burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn.
Yep.
First is the tares.
So the left behind people are us, and those taken out are
The tares.
boy, Tinio got it all wrong, didn't it?
A lot of people
We
do.
made a lot of money.
See, that's the only important thing, Herb. As long as they're making money, that's what most of.
Well, see, you know, even
A lot of people were deceived then.
even well,
I don't
Herb,
think it was
even
intentional, do you?
I don't think that it was
No, I don't.
purposely intentional. That I don't think they were, you know.
Haha, let's get these people.
Yeah, but even me growing up, you know, in church my whole life, I was always taught that if you go to bed one night
Mm-hmm.
and you wake up, and if you're old enough and you roll over and your spouse isn't there, you've missed the rapture. If you're, you know,
Come home,
even
your
when I
parents
was
aren't
working,
there.
I worked as a bag boy. My first job was a bag boy at a grocery store, and my pastor even said this one time. He's talking about the rapture. He goes, one day there will be Scotty, and he'll be pushing that buggy out, and then he'll be gone, and everybody. Then he won't have to face all this stuff. But that's not what.
What Christ said.
No, he says if Scotty's at the grocery store, he's pushing the cart, and he's gone. He ain't going to paradise.
Bad news, Scotty.
He's going to a bad place.
You weren't being dumb?
No,
Beamed
but
up, Scotty?
Christ goes on to explain this in the next page. He was teaching a parable, and so the apostles asked him to tell us the meaning. And so this is Christ again explaining what we just read. The field is the world, the good seed are the sons of the kingdom, but the tares are the sons of the wicked one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Therefore, as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, and they were gathered first, so it will be at the end of this age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and those who practice lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then, meaning after, the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father.
So, yes, sir.
So if I remain a pre-trib, am I apostatizing?
If you end up poof and gone, you're a terror. You're apostasy.
Well, I always knew I was a,
No rebel.
If you are
Well, see, this
preaching
is
a terrible
pre-tribulation,
joker.
you're
I'm a
apostasizing.
terrible joker.
The problem that I think
You'll forgive me if I'm a terror.
to, and this is me, to preach and tell people that there's a pre-trib, you're doing a very large injustice. Because you're lying to them. And what's going to happen is when they find themselves not gone, then I would say a large majority is just going to walk
That's
away.
going to be where the falling away comes.
That's going to be the falling away. Because their thinking will be, God lied to me.
Yep.
God told me that I was going to be gone. I will have to go through this. Why should I stay faithful to Him? So then you've got the falling away, and then Paul says, then the man of sin, the son of perdition, shows up, and he says, you didn't miss nothing.
here.
I'm here. I'm God. So you're still good. So that's the problem that I think in doing somebody to not study it out. Study the scriptures. I don't think that Timothy thought for 1 minute that he was going to be pre-chilled. Paul, the Apostle Paul, did not think that. Peter, read Peter's letters. He didn't think that. Peter goes back and references Noah in his letter. So the apostles did not know that. None of the apostles thought that because they asked Yeshua before he ascended into heaven, then at that time will you reestablish or turn the kingdom back over to Israel? They weren't planning on going anywhere. They knew that the kingdom was going to be established here. And so where would they want to be?
Here.
Here.
Israel.
The apostles did not ask him because the apostles had done heard him. They read Matthew. They read Luke.
Out of their King James Bible?
Out of their King James Bibles. They already knew what was going to take place, so they did not ask him, Jesus, are you going to take us home to be with you at that point?
Into heaven.
You're going to take us to heaven?
Up to heaven.
Up to heaven. They didn't ask him that. They said, but are you going to establish the kingdom of Israel or turn it back into Israel's hands at that time? So
And
there's
the
no...
same thing that the angel told him at his ascension.
What are you looking at?
What are you looking up for?
Yep.
The same one you seen
The
leave,
same one. He says-
you will see come back in like manner.
Yep. I think he says this same, King James says, this same Jesus that you've seen go up is going to return back.
You know, the thought of being disappointed that I wasn't raptured first is probably going to. I would not fall away. That wouldn't lead me to fall away, because the thought of going through tribulation has always been in the back of my mind, because it says so. We're not appointed unto wrath, but we're appointed unto tribulation.
We're not pointing to
We're
God's
The
wrath.
God-
Yeah.
God's wrath, right?
Yeah,
right.
but
That's
we're
what
always
talking about.
open to the devil's wrath.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
But you know, Jesus.
So I'd rather expect the tribulation and miss it than count on missing it and not. You see what I
Absolutely.
mean?
Right, and that's
Doesn't
the
that
thing.
make more sense?
Absolutely.
That's what so many
Well, that's
of
the
our
way
young,
I've been
that's why
feeling.
so many of our young people will
That's the way
be
I've been
prone
feeling.
to fall away
But
because
when I read
they've been
the so-called,
church.
those who know
Christianity.
the scriptures and know Greek and Hebrew backwards and forwards
Don't
say they're
listen to
pre-trib,
them. Read
No.
this.
Yes, this is it.
but
But
they analyze it, they study it, they go
Who does?
through word for
Yeah,
word.
but
False
they put
teachers.
into it
They're
their
biased.
doctrine.
They're biased.
And
Yes.
their agenda.
They
Can't
have
it
an
can't be
agenda.
avoided.
Not in humans, no.
It does seem like.
One of my best friends is a theologian.